The Orioles looked like they were cruising to a pretty straightforward and much needed win on Thursday. And then all chaos broke loose late in the game. But somehow the Orioles found a way to win it and avoid the sweep against the Marlins. And I'll recap it all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Friday, July 26th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap what turned into a wild 7-6 extra innings win for the Orioles over the Marlins on Thursday afternoon as they had a comfortable lead, completely lost it, and then won the game anyway to avoid the sweep in Miami. Get you the 5 things you need to know from that W. Then take a look at my latest edition of the Orioles Bullpen Trust Power Ranking. It's a good time to kind of reevaluate the bullpen because it could need some additions coming up soon with the trade deadline just 4 days away. And finally, I'll get to the rest of the teams I haven't talked about when perusing what pitchers could be available at the deadline for the Orioles. I'll touch on the rest of the NL East and all of the guys available in the NL West coming up at the end of the show. But that is all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Supply House. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to get parts fast. Shop for your next plumbing, HVAC, or electrical job and get fast shipping from coast to coast at supplyhouse.com. So we start today with a win. It is a win. It goes into the win column. It snaps the Orioles' 3-game losing streak. They avoid the sweep in Miami. The final score is Orioles 7, Marlins 6 in 10 innings at Marlins Park. It is a game that should not have gone to extra innings. It should have been a very straightforward, easy Orioles W, especially when you are leading 6-1 in the 8th inning. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but a win is a win is a win. And even with the Orioles playing some rough baseball lately over an extended stretch, the win gets them to 61-41. With the Yankees off, they are now 2 games clear of New York, sitting atop the AL East. And even with this bad series, they actually gained ground on the Yankees this week. And they once again hold the best record in the American League, despite the version of baseball they're playing. It does kind of put things into perspective. Not a lot of teams in the AL playing good baseball at the moment right now. And the O's a little lucky in that sense, but hey, still got the best record. Could still argue they're the best team in the entire league. But I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from this Orioles win over the Marlins on Thursday afternoon. And the first thing you need to know is, well, Corbin Burnes was absolutely dealing in this game for the Orioles. Burnes ends up pitching into the 8th, lasting 7 1/3 in this one for the O's. His longest start in an Oriole uniform. He allows 3 runs on 6 hits with 5 strikeouts, 1 walk, and a homer on 96 pitches. Now a 2.45 ERA on the season. And for Burnes, he just kind of rolled through this one. Now, this was the perfect offense. Struggling Marlins bats for him to face. He dominated them, and he dominated them efficiently, which he's done a better job of here with the Orioles in 2024. Now, you ran into a little bad luck in the 8th inning. He was at, I believe, 87 pitches through 7. The O's were up 6-1. It was an easy decision to send him back out there. Gave up kind of a bloop leadoff single, then got an out. And then there was a ground ball up the middle. You can argue whether or not Gunnar Henderson would have got to it up the middle or it would have squeaked into center field for a base hit. But either way, Corbin Burnes kicks at it, deflects it into right field, ends up being an RBI single to make it a 6-2 game. That was just kind of unfortunate, and that takes him out of the game. The inherited runner then ended up scoring as well, so that's why he had 3 runs against him. But the cutter was, the heavy cutter usage we usually see. Wasn't perfect command, but had good velocity. He spotted it where he needed to at times. But once again, the curveball was the weapon for Corbin Burnes. In this game, he had 17 whiffs, 7 of them coming off of the curveball. And that pitch was, he was basically cutter curveball in this game. 96 pitches, 48 cutters, 30 curveballs. Then he dumped in 9 sliders, 7 changeups, and 2 sinkers. He was basically a 2-pitch guy, and it worked pretty much all day against Miami. That curveball has looked better and better as the season has gone on. Opponents hitting just 0.67 with a 49% swing and miss rate against Burnes' curveball in the month of July. Thing was great in June as well. It's just been nasty. He talked about it after the start, how that curveball just been there for him time and time again when he's kind of tweaking the cutter a little bit. Yeah, he's often to watch pitch. It's unfortunate that 2 runs got charged to him in the 8th, but also amazing to have an Orioles pitcher pitch into the 8th inning, right? They got 2+ innings from Albert Suarez on Tuesday. They got 4 innings from Chase McDermott on Wednesday in terms of their starters. So to get 7 1/3 from Burnes was huge on Thursday. Second thing you need to know from this one is that Connor Norby homered in his return to the Oriole lineup. Now, he was in Miami on the taxi squad after the Jorge Mateo injury on Tuesday night, but we finally got the official word on Mateo Wednesday night, and then Jorge Mateo officially went on the 10-day IL with that dislocated elbow on Thursday, and Connor Norby was recalled to join the roster. Hyde did say, hey, we're going to play Norby a lot. Maybe he can provide a spark to our offense. And although he did strike out with a couple runners on in his first AB, his second AB, he made the most of it. An opposite field solo home run off of Roddery Muñez, 379 feet into the Oriole bullpen. Cionel Perez made an amazing catch with his hat. Wasn't all we saw from Cionel Perez in this game that was amazing, but it was cool to put the Orioles up 6-0. It felt like kind of a monkey off their back as they kind of just attacked early in this game. 1 in the first, 1 in the second, 3 in the third, and 1 in the fourth, and Norby kind of capping that off. And honestly, he had a good game overall. Also had an infield single in the 9th inning. He really did play a solid second base until that play in the 9th that we'll get to, where he just fell over and didn't get an out. Not sure what that was. Was kind of surprised Ramon Arias was not in the game defensively in the 9th inning, because that's generally what you would think the Orioles would do. But Hyde did say Wednesday that Jorge Mateo could be out for a while, and I think we all consider that long-term Jackson Holliday or Kobe Mayo will really be that replacement in the lineup. For now, it's Connor Norby's spot, and this is his time to shine. This is similar to the chance that Colton Cowser got early this season when Austin Hayes was struggling. Cowser got in there and got regular playing time, and he immediately took advantage of it, and he's been mostly a regular since then. Can Norby do that? If he could, that would be huge for him and huge for the O's. But speaking of Colton Cowser, the third thing you need to know from the Orioles win on Thursday is that Cowser is finally heating up again. He hit a massive 3-run homer in the 3rd inning of this game to make it a 5-0 Oriole lead, 406 feet off the bat, off kind of a cutter down the middle, hit it to right center field. And we know how good Cowser was in April. These are his WRC pluses by month. Again, WRC plus, kind of a weighted, all-encompassing offensive stat where 100 is league average. 179 in April, 69 in May, 91 in June. Okay, that's okay. And then entering Thursday, he was at a 126 WRC plus in July, and that has now only gone up since he hit the home run and also drew a walk in Thursday's game. He's starting to swing it much, much better. He's now actually has a higher OPS than Adley Rutschman on the season. And here's the really interesting part. It's been pretty clear why Cowser had struggled in May and June. He's hit the fastball all season, but was just struggling to hit breaking stuff and off-speed stuff. Now, he hit that game-tying 3-run double off a hanging changeup on Wednesday night. That was good to see. This one considered a fastball, the cutter down the middle. But in July, this was entering Thursday's game, Cowser had kind of completely flipped on its head what he was doing against certain pitches. Was hitting only 0.63 against fastballs, but 438 against breaking stuff and 375 against off-speed stuff in July. He is slowly figuring out how to hit non-fastballs. We already know he knows how to absolutely mash fastballs. If he can put that together, this could be a huge second half for Colton Cowser, which would be ginormous for this Orioles offense right now. Fourth thing you need to know from this O's win is that Anthony Santander has caught up to Gunnar Henderson in the Oriole home run lead. Santander with a solo home run in the top of the 1st inning that opened the scoring for the O's, and it ties him with Gunnar at 28 home runs on the season. This one, a monster shot into right field in the second deck, 105 off the bat, 415 feet. And it continued a fantastic day for Santander, who ended up going 2 for 5 with 5 hard hit balls. Honestly, a super unlucky day for Anthony Santander, but all 5 of his batted balls over 100 miles per hour off the bat. The homer in the first, fly out in the third, where Jazz Chisholm made an insane diving catch in the gap, took away extra bases, a ground out in the 5th, a fly out in the 8th, and then a big single in the 10th that kind of ignited the Orioles. It wasn't really a rally, but scoring the run to take the lead in that inning. He was just mashing the cover off the ball. He's done it for a while now. We know how good he was in June. Now he's tied Gunnar. Orioles, second and third in home runs in the American League. Gunnar and Santander behind Judge. Shout out to the Masson broadcast for this stat. The only other time, or at least the only time in a full season, that two Orioles have finished top three in the American League in home runs is 1966. Frank Robinson hit 49 and Boog Powell hit 34. You might remember what happened in 1966. We'd like to see that again. But it's really like the comparison between Gunnar and Santander right now. Santander, 6 homers, a 160 plus WRC plus in July. Gunnar has been basically a league average hitter in July, only has 2 home runs. And even though he did single in the 9th, he's 2 for 20 over his last 5 games. And I talked about it on Wednesday's episode. Adley and Gunnar are both kind of slumping a little bit right now. That's really the big reason for the Orioles' offensive slump. And it doesn't make you feel too bad because it's like, both of those guys are going to turn it around. And at that point, the Orioles offense will fully turn it around as well. Although with the 6 runs, or I guess 7 runs total on Thursday, at least a good start. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from this Orioles 7-6 win in 10 innings over the Marlins on Thursday as they avoided the sweep is that once the bullpen came in, once Corbin Burnes left and Jacob Webb entered with the Orioles leading 6-2 in the bottom of the 8th inning, things went absolutely haywire. Now, Webb got a couple of strikeouts in the 8th. He found his changeup again, but he did allow an RBI double, so that made it 6-3 going into the 9th. Then we saw a super weird line-out double play in the top of the 9th when the O's had a rally and couldn't score. And then bottom of the 9th, in comes Craig Kimbrell. On 4 days rest, Orioles leading 6-3, bad Marlins offense facing 6, 7, and 8, just has to shut it down. He gets a ground out for the first out, and then he gets another ground ball, which looks like the second out. Connor Norby, it's kind of a tough play, fields it, charging, and then just falls over. Trips on his own feet, doesn't get the throw off. Connor Norby does struggle defensively at second base. That kind of showed some of it. It was a little bit of bad luck, a little bit of bad footwork, and that just started the snowball effect in the 9th inning. Then Kimbrell walks back-to-back hitters. His command wasn't terrible. He got squeezed a little bit, but still, you can't walk back-to-back hitters at the bottom of the order. Then forces a ground ball to short. It would not have been a double play. It was bases loaded and 1 out. Certainly would not have been a double play, but it's 6-3 game. Gunnar Henderson easily could have fielded it, thrown to first, gotten the second out. Instead, he boots it completely. Now it's bases loaded 6-4 with 1 out. Sac fly to left makes it 6-5 with 2 outs. And then a Josh Bell RBI single ties the game at 6. Luckily, Colton Cowser was playing deep, was able to hold Jazz Chisholm at third base and not allow him to score the winning run. But just kind of a complete disaster. And again, you don't want to walk 2 batters in the 9th inning where you're trying to get a save. And Kimbrell wasn't good. But also, he should have gotten that save. He got that first ground ball, and he got 2 further grounders in the inning that easily should have been outs. Also got that fly ball out on the sac fly. The guy only was given 2 outs, but he truly recorded 4 in that inning, or at least earned 4. And again, I'm not saying he looked good, but he should have had a save. The Orioles should have won that game in 9 innings, probably 6-4 with a little bit of traffic on the bases. And they just fell apart. So shout out to Yennier Cano, who came in, got a big strikeout, kept the game tied to get it to extras. And then we go top 10. And it's okay, the Orioles are starting to rally. They got second and third, 1 out. Ryan Mountcastle pokes a single into right field. Okay, 1 run scores. Here comes Cedric Mullins. He's thrown out at the plate. You're not too mad at that. Cedric, great speed. It took a perfect throw to get him. It did. Okay, you got your 1 run. But then Mountcastle's going to second, and he gets thrown out there. And it's somehow an RBI single to give them the lead, and also an inning-ending double play in the top of the 10th. More base running mistakes by one of the best base running teams in baseball. They ran the bases horribly in this series, along with offensive struggles. And it's just what else can go wrong here in this game? And really, the reason the Orioles still won this game is because Cionel Perez, who gave the game away out of the bullpen on Wednesday night, comes back into the bottom of the 10th with the zombie runner on second and saves the day. Strikeout, ground out, strikeout to put up the 0 and get the save. He was pumped, and rightfully so, after getting that final strikeout of Nick Gordon to end this game. I mean, what do I got to say about all that? I am just happy this series is over. I'm happy the Orioles escaped without getting swept by the lowly Marlins, and maybe going back home this weekend to take on the Padres and kind of reset the mojo of this team. And at the end of the day, it was a 500 road trip, 3-3 against the Rangers and Marlins. At the end of the day, they're still in first place. They're still the best record in the American League. But man, oh man, if they would have lost that game, Like if Brian De La Cruz had come up with a base hit and a walk-off single in the bottom of the ninth, I was ready to call that rock bottom of the Orioles season. But they didn't quite let it happen. And they got a win, and a win is a win is a win. But that bullpen, despite the great performance from Perez on Thursday, we know has been a little shaky at times this year, and it could use some upgrades. But before they make any upgrades on Tuesday's deadline, we should do one more assessment of how we feel about the bullpen currently. My latest edition of the Orioles Bullpen Trust Power Rankings is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about. And yes, we are even talking about your rival cities. With hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more at Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay, even in a baseball rival city. Now, the O's are home for a bit of a homestand here, but in August, they're going to Toronto and Tampa Bay. And although those aren't the Orioles' biggest rivals, they have been at times. You want to check out Florida and you want to check out Canada? Maybe head on that trip and maybe use Booking.com for all your hotel needs, anything you need for your summer travel this MLB season. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com, on the site, or in the Booking.com app. And today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. Now, I love sports, and I love when there's a lot of sports going on. That's not super the case during the summer. We got the Olympics going on at the moment and Major League Baseball every night, but it's a little barren sometimes, the schedule. But that doesn't matter when you've got FanDuel. All you got to do is open up the app, and you can get anything you want. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. At FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. The Orioles found a way to win that game on Thursday. It should not have been that hard when you're leading 6-1 in the eighth inning. And some of that was the failure of the bullpen, specifically Craig Kimbrell and his defense behind him, and a little bit of Jacob Webb as well in the eighth inning. But you've had a couple of bullpen struggles. You've got the trade deadline 4 days away. Good time as any to do another version of the Orioles Bullpen Trust Power Rankings. How it works, I take everybody currently in the Orioles bullpen and I put them in three categories. Guys I trust, someone if they came in with a one-run lead in an inning, I would trust them to keep that lead. Guys I maybe trust, that's okay. Sometimes I could see them getting it done, but I'm a little worried about them as well. And then guys I don't trust, that's, hey, keep him away from anything close to high leverage or protecting a lead. Let's start with trust. The Orioles currently have 9 guys in their bullpen. They're rolling with 4 starters at the moment. And I put 5 of the 9 guys in the trust. And I'm going to start with a guy who, up until the 10th inning of Thursday's game, I had him in maybe trust. And quite honestly, if you look at the body of work, he probably still deserves to be in maybe trust. But after what he did with those 2 strikeouts, just pounding fastballs in the 10th inning on Thursday, I'm putting Cionel Perez in trust. Is that maybe a little recency bias? It absolutely is. But after saving that game, even after the bad performance Wednesday, he's in trust. Perez on the year, 29 2/3 innings, a 4.55, or should say now, 30 2/3 innings on the year for Cionel Perez after he pitched a huge inning there on Thursday. He's got a 4.40 ERA with a 3.14 FIP, about a 21% K rate and a 12% walk rate. Listen, his 52% ground ball rate's been good. He's been too wild and hit too hard, and 4 earned runs in his previous 2 outings coming into Thursday, but I wiped it all away for giving us the bliss of that win on Thursday and just an honorary placement into this category. Next up in trust is Yennier Cano. Did get a huge strikeout on Thursday to keep the game tied and send it to extras. 39 2/3 innings for Cano, a 2.75 ERA on the season. 2.72 ERA on the season now for Cano, but a 4.34 FIP. He's been hit hard. 24% strikeout rate. The 12% walk rate is the concerning thing for Cano. The walks are way up this season. Now, he does lead Major League Baseball with a 68.3% ground ball rate. That's what's made him so good. But it is now 7 straight scoreless appearances for Cano out of the Oriole bullpen. It's kind of unfair to him because people think he's been bad this year. Really, he was just so good last year that it was impossible to live up to that. He's still been a really solid MLB setup man this year, just not to the level of last year. He's walking more guys, but he's still a guy I trust coming out of the bullpen. Even with a little bit of struggles, on Thursday, I still do have Jacob Webb in the trust category. 45 innings and a 2.60 ERA for the O's with 3.23 FIP, 24% Ks, 12% walks for everyday Jacob Webb. Still is having a bit of a walk issue, and he did allow an earned run on Wednesday. That was his first of July. Now, neither of the runs Thursday, or the one run Thursday was not earned. It was earned to Burnes, but he still wasn't at his best. But he did find his changeup in that outing on Thursday. That's the biggest pitch for Webb. That is his weapon. Didn't have it Wednesday, had it Thursday. Big reason why he's still in the trust and is definitely a rubber arm that I don't know where the O's would be without Jacob Webb this year. Next up in trust, I've got two more guys who you could make a good argument that they do not belong in the trust category. But everything they've shown me so far, I'm fine with them pitching maybe in a high leverage spot, Sue. The first one is Burch Smith. 4 1/3 scoreless innings, 1 hit, 6 Ks, and no walks since joining the Orioles bullpen. Yeah, it hasn't been that many outings, but if he's going to be this good and barely allow base runners, he's going to be on there. He's throwing more cutters than when he was with the Marlins. He's trying a sweeper. The stuff looks really, really good. He hasn't really been in high leverage yet. I would not be mad at all if Brandon Hyde threw Burch Smith out there in a high leverage spot against the Padres this weekend. He's pitching better than pretty much anyone in this bullpen right now. So for me, is it 4 1/3 innings? Yeah. Is it trust category? Yeah, it is. And the same goes for Vinny Natoli, who is also in the trust category. He's got 4 scoreless innings since joining the Orioles, 2 hits, 3 Ks, and also no walks. That's a big category for those two guys. Same thing with Smith, like small sample size, but no runs. And his cutter has looked completely nasty every time he's thrown. So you know what? Send him out there in high leverage this weekend. Let's just see what he can do before they add to that bullpen next week and have to make some tough decisions on who to cut from the pen. So that moves me into the maybe trust category. 4 relievers left. I've got 3 of them in maybe trust. And I mentioned how I moved Cionel Perez from maybe trust to trust just because of Thursday. Well, I moved Craig Kimbrell from trust to maybe trust also because of Thursday. And again, it's important to note that while he was bad, he was not nearly as bad as what the scoreline showed because his defense completely failed him behind him with the mistakes by Gunnar and Norby in the infield. It wasn't going to be a clean save, but it should have easily been a save, and it was not for Craig Kimbrell. Either way, it's a 2.92 ERA with a very similar FIP in 37 innings. His 38% strikeout rate is still 4th in Major League Baseball among qualified relief pitchers, and his 12% walk rate isn't great, but not absolutely horrendous. Now, coming into Thursday, yes, he had that bad outing where he gave up the 3-run homer to Ben Rice against the Yankees right before the All-Star break. But that was his only outing in which he had allowed runs out of his last 10. Scoreless in 9 out of 10. Well, now it's scoreless 9 out of 11. You can't get what happened out of your head. He's in maybe trust for now. Give me a couple of clean saves. He'll go back to trust for the O's. Next up in maybe trust is Keegan Aiken. 53 2/3 innings for him this year, a 3.35 ERA, a 3.22 FIP, 30% strikeout rate and 7% walk rate. Pretty good numbers. He's still getting swings and misses, still throwing strikes, still getting some soft contact. The underlying data is great, but again, he just keeps putting up shaky results from time to time that can just never allow me to put him in the trust category for more than like a week or so. Now, it's 0 earned runs for Aiken's last 6 appearances, which is a good sign for the left-hander. It's just like I can't fully trust him because he'll look good, and then complete blow up at a bad time. But I get why he still has a roster spot because the underlying stuff looks really good for Aiken. And the last guy in maybe trust is Brian Baker. I bet you thought after yesterday, oh, Brian Baker's back in AAA. No. He is right back here. He was optioned to AAA on Wednesday to give a roster spot to Chase McDermott, who started Wednesday and made his major league debut. But on Thursday, McDermott was sent right back down to AAA, and Brian Baker was recalled. Now, you might be asking, well, don't pitchers have to spend 15 days in AAA before they can be recalled? How is Brian Baker back? Well, the Orioles used the loophole because they made the roster move at the same time that they called up Connor Norby and put Jorge Mateo on the IL. And because they did them all at the same time, on paper, technically, you say Brian Baker is being added to the roster to replace Jorge Mateo, who's going on the injured list. And then the other move is Connor Norby on the roster and Chase McDermott to AAA. So that's how you're able to get Brian Baker back in one day. 16 and 2/3 innings, 4.32 ERA, 21% Ks, 8% walks in the big league so far this year. Stuff has looked fine, but basically is getting no whiffs out there. But again, he is back with McDermott right back to AAA. I don't think that changes McDermott's ability to get another start with the Orioles. They do have a doubleheader on Monday coming up against the Blue Jays. You get a 27th man for a doubleheader, and that can be someone who's been in the minors for less than the required 15 days. I still think there's a good chance the Orioles call up McDermott to start one of those two games in the doubleheader on Monday. And then after that, you never kind of know, because in theory, the Orioles should be adding one or maybe even two starting pitchers at the deadline. And then you don't kind of need McDermott in the rotation. So he does go back to AAA and most likely rejoins the Orioles later in the year as hopefully a bullpen weapon in relief. And then finally, in Don't Trust, is Cole Irvin. Pretty self-explanatory. As a reliever this year, 14 1/3 innings and a 7.53 ERA. He's the long man and the mop-up guy right now. He's out of options. The Orioles don't want to DFA him because he still has 2 more years of team control, and he is a starting pitcher on a team that, although he hasn't been amazing at times, will need starting pitching next year. But we will see when that roster crunch comes, if the O's do add pitchers next week, what happens to Irvin. But right now, despite a 1-2-3 inning out of the bullpen on Wednesday, he is still currently in the Don't Trust category. But speaking of that bullpen, and I've talked about it a lot, the Orioles are still looking to add 4 days from the trade deadline. Coming up next, we talk about the last chunk of teams, the Nats, the Giants, and the Rockies, who I haven't discussed, and we run through which players could be available via trade to the Orioles from those 3 ball clubs. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by SupplyHouse.com. You can get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? You can get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every single time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. So join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. So to finish things up today on a Friday episode, been bouncing around every division in Major League Baseball over the past couple of weeks on the podcast and just running through each team that could be sellers at the trade deadline and giving you the names and quick scouting reports on any pitcher, starter or reliever, who could be dealt at the deadline and that the Orioles could go after before that deadline that comes up Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Now, we've done some of the NL East because I ran through the Marlins pitchers the O's should get out of their bullpen on Wednesday's episode. But we got to do the rest of the NL East and all of the NL West. And theoretically, there's really 3 teams on that list that will most likely, or at least somewhat, be sellers. Now, in the NL East, the Mets were at one point maybe going to be sellers, but the Mets just swept the Yankees in the Bronx. They won all 4 games of the Subway Series. I mean, shout out to the Mets. We love the Mets on this podcast for doing that to the Yankees. And the New York Mets right now, as we stand, have the second wild card in the National League. So I don't think they're going to be sellers. So that leaves the Washington Nationals in the NL East because, of course, the Phillies and the Braves, they're not sellers either. Now, the Nats have 2 starters that could be traded. Patrick Corbin, I'm good. Trevor Williams has been having a good year, but is still injured. I'm good there as well. So really you turn to the bullpen, and there's 3 guys there. The first one is the right-hander Kyle Finnegan, the Nats closer. I talked about him earlier this week when I did my controllable relievers wish list. He is not a free agent until after 2025. Good closer option, great fastball. Maybe the underlying data not as good, but would still make your bullpen better. Then the other 2 guys are a couple middle relievers they have, 2 veteran righties. The first one is Derek Law, who will be a free agent after 2025. He's had a dominant slider this year. Opponents hitting just 172 against it with a 41% whiff percentage against Law. In 60 innings on the season, he has been certainly a workhorse this year. A 3.30 ERA with a 3.58 FIP, 21% strikeout rate, and a 7% walk rate with a really good 49% ground ball rate as well. It's a 6-pitch mix, so you use a lot of things, cutter and slider mostly, And he's been tough on lefties. It's a low barrel rate. He could be a solid, cheap option for the middle of the bullpen. And another solid, cheap option could be Dylan Floro. Right-handed pitcher, rental reliever. He'll be a free agent after this year. Bounced around a bunch of teams the last couple of years. It's always traded seemingly at the deadline. A 1.4 barrel rate against Floro this year, top 5 lowest in Major League Baseball. That's pretty impressive. It's a 1.98 ERA with a 2.36 FIP in 50 innings, 20% strikeout rate, 7% walk rate. That's not bad. Doesn't really have good stuff, but he just throws a bunch of junk at you that moves a whole bunch. Gets some swing and miss on the slider, throws a lot of sinkers for ground balls, has a good ground ball rate on the year. He will just get you to beat the ball into the ground. And yeah, he's not a high super leverage guy, but he deepens your bullpen if you go after him. Then we move on to the NL West. Dodgers not sellers, Padres not sellers. Diamondbacks, I think at this point, I mean, they're close to where they were last year. They're 53-50. They're a game out of the wild card. They're not going to sell either after seeing that they could add a little bit and get to the World Series last year. So I think the Giants could be sellers at this point. I mean, they're 49-55. They're 5.5 out of the wild card right now. I don't think they're going to sell big pieces, but there's a couple relievers in the two twins, the lefty Taylor Rogers and the righty Tyler Rogers. Both are free agents after 2025 who you could go after. Taylor Rogers, the lefty, 31% hard hit rate is super low. He only throws a sinker and a sweeper, but in 40 innings, he's got a 2.27 ERA, which has been pretty good. Good strikeout rates, low walk rates, kind of like him from the left side. And then Tyler Rogers, the righty, is the most extreme submarine delivery you've ever seen in your life. He only throws 82 miles an hour, and despite the fact that he did give up 2 homers in his game on Thursday, doesn't really give up much hard contact at all. A 2.27 ERA, I'm looking at Tyler Rogers, a 3.02 ERA with a 3.25 FIP in 48 innings on the year. Doesn't walk anyone, a 1.5% walk rate for him. It's the lowest of his career. 3 walks in 48 innings for Rogers this season. Yeah, that's pretty good. So I would take either of those guys. And then finally, the Colorado Rockies. They've got 2 starters they could trade. The first is Austin Gomber. He's a free agent after 2025, but he's been bad, and I don't think anyone will want him. The other one is the righty Cal Quantrill, also a free agent after 2025, has certainly been in the baseball news this week. I did my rental starters, not my rental starters, my controllable starters wish list episode. You can get a full breakdown on Quantrill over there. Really good changeup, large pitch mix, doesn't really miss bats, but it's been pretty good at Coors Field this year, so that always reigns supreme for some guys. And then there's probably more relievers the Rockies would be willing to trade, but none of them that are that good. The 2 I highlighted is the lefty Jalen Beeks. He started the year really well as the Rockies closer. He is a rental, used to be with the Rays. Doesn't really get hit that hard. Changeup is good for swings and misses, good against lefties, but he has a 7.06 ERA since June 1st, is trending in the wrong direction. And then the other one is right-handed sidewinder Justin Lawrence, who was floated in trades last year. Not a free agent until after 2028. He's got a 53% ground ball rate and doesn't allow a lot of barrels, but only throws a sinker and a sweeper. And pretty much after a really good 2023, everything for Lawrence has gotten worse across the board in 2024. So probably someone you want to stay away from. Honestly, of everyone I've mentioned on this episode, Rogers twins I'd be okay with. Quantrill I'd be okay with. Finnegan I'd go after a little bit more. Maybe Flora I'd be okay with. Not a super inspiring group, but it's good to know kind of what is out there for the Orioles to go after, because at the end of the day, they need to add at least something, at least a reliever and at least a starter to this team at the deadline on Tuesday. And got plenty of deadline coverage coming up next week on the podcast. But here's 2 things. One, the Orioles play the Padres this weekend, coming off quite a celebration as Dylan Cease threw a no-hitter in D.C. against the Nationals on Thursday, second no-hitter in Padres history. Friday night game at 7:05 is Adam Mazur, the rookie right-hander, against Grayson Rodriguez. Saturday at 4:05, Michael King, the former Yankee, having a great year, goes up against Dean Kramer. And then on Sunday, both are TBD for the starters. That one is at 1:35. Padres at 55-50 right now. As I mentioned, they hold the second NL wild card at the moment. So I'll be back Monday. I'll recap everything you need to know from the 3 games between the Orioles and the Padres. Then the O's do have a doubleheader on Monday. And then they got the trade deadline Tuesday. So a lot of content coming up. But here's the thing. I would love to go live on the podcast here immediately after the Orioles' big trade. I will be at the Jersey Shore this weekend without a whole lot of internet connection and definitely without my setup to record live. So because of that, I think we all know that the Orioles are going to make their big trade probably right smack in the middle of the day on Saturday. So if you don't have a live reaction from me, that is why. Something could be coming Sunday evening or Monday if the O's make a trade. I would love for them to make a trade, but a little part of me hopes, hey, let's wait until Monday or Tuesday until I can get some content here on Locked On Orioles. But either way, I will be back Monday to recap the series between the O's and the Padres. But until then, I am Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.